Oh, I mean, with Vladimir Putin, as we've seen, all bets are off. We'd like to think that he's not going to go into chemical weapons and, heaven forbid, nuclear weapons, but we don't know what he's thinking, and it's. I mean, he's already gone beyond what we imagined he would do. So let's just pray that he doesn't go over that line and get into the really massive, weapons of mass destruction mode in this war.
Yeah, but I'm sure, Linda, you also heard the debate going on, not just today, but it certainly was inflamed today about these claims from Russia that the Americans have set up shop inside Ukraine, and they've got all sorts of chemical weapons labs and biological weapons labs, and the worry is that he's going to use this as a false flag, or that he's going to use this as an opportunity to say, well, if they're using them, then I will too. What is the validity and how easy is it to disprove the things that just roll out of his mouth?
So with Putin, I mean, he says this is classic Russian argument to accuse the other side of doing what you might do. And, we can say this is ridiculous. He's fantasizing. This is absolutely not true. But he, we don't know what he's going to do. And, he's got his entire country listening to state-run television, and a lot of people believe him and believe what he's saying. And so, if he's going to go this far, we just don't know. We just don't know.
So I want to switch gears slightly, but still on the topic of heavy weaponry. There was again a reference made today to this growing debate and also confusing debate about Soviet-era MiGs that were left behind in Poland. The Poles want to send them to Germany and then have the Americans fly them into Ukraine to help the Ukrainians fend off the images that you're seeing, right there. But I'm not sure what day it is, but every single day there seems to be a different position or a differing position regarding these MiGs. And by the way, there's just delicious irony about Soviet MiGs fighting in to fight, Russians. But to that point, Kamala Harris said something in Poland today, and I want to play it and ask you something about it on the other side. Have a listen to this.
I want to be very clear. The United States and Poland are united in what we have done and are prepared to do to help Ukraine and the people of Ukraine. Full stop.
Okay, well, that sounds clear enough, but yesterday it wasn't that clear because John Kirby at the Pentagon said, a line in the sand. We're just not going to do that. The Poles want us to do that, and we're just not going to do that. You're a military man. Explain to me how we can be so different. And I think the real question I'm trying to get at is we just don't know, do we? I mean, is the Pentagon doing things that we just don't know? And I secretly think a lot of Americans hope they are.
Well, Ashleigh, the Pentagon is doing a lot of things. One thing that keeps coming clear is there's a steady flow of weapons that's going into Ukraine. Nobody really knows exactly how that's going in there, but obviously it's being done in a fashion where they're not going to be targeted by the Russians. So yes, there's a lot of things going on which are being done in a way to avoid being targeted and taken out. The problem with the planes, which went back and forth on whether they're going to do that, is the Poles are going to send them to the U.S., then the U.S. would own them, then the U.S. would give them to the Ukrainians would fly them in. It's a law of war issue, and it deals with the perception of Putin, which is if those planes fly from NATO airspace from a NATO country, are they combatant planes flying into to do war with Russia? And obviously Putin says, yes, they are. And we could have split hairs and said, well, they won't be armed while they're flying into the country or all sorts of things. But frankly, it's a very difficult policy. It's a difficult logistics thing, but it's a very difficult policy thing, and it's a legal issue. And the Poles moved forward, and we weren't ready to pick up on that initiative.
So this is a great map, for our viewers to look at. It gives a lot of perspective. Blue is NATO, right? All those European nations, and I'm not even including, further west than that to the United States and Canada. But red is Russia, and there's little Ukraine in the middle. And the perspective from Putin is that he's up against a growing blue threat. How a little bit more red of Ukraine would help him is kind of tricky to make the argument there. But that's his perspective, right? So the question, I think, is, and I'm going to push it again, Linda, and I don't know where you fall in on this. A lot of things are said publicly on microphones that aren't said in war rooms. And sometimes the public narrative is, we're not doing something, when clearly something is being done. Do you think that's a possibility with regard to the changing narrative we've been hearing from the White House to the Pentagon to the Polish, foreign ministry, to what might actually be happening as we speak?
In terms of potential NATO involvement in fighting this war, more than what we're seeing.
Really just the
sending
jets.
the jets.
Yeah, like sending those fighter jets. There's just the big debate keeps going back and forth, but somehow I kind of figure that's just for the public consumption.
No, there's a lot of discussion about what we can be doing, and I'm not a military person. I don't know logistically what's possible. I mean, we've heard arguments that there should be sort of a limited no-fly zone over Ukraine that at least protects certain corridors to allow civilian evacuations. There are serious military people arguing for this, and I know there's a lot of sympathy in the United States to get more involved, and that we seem to be kind of splitting hairs in making this argument that helping the Ukrainians in this way would somehow mean that we're fully at war with Russia, that there has to be some kind of gray zone there. And I know a lot of Americans hope that there's a lot that we're doing quietly and secretly, or at least secretly, no public acknowledgement that is helping the Ukrainians.
So I want to play something that I found just so intriguing. And this was an exclusive that NewsNation, got the other day with a former KGB general, retired and obviously living in asylum in Maryland now in the safety of the American shores. This is a man who actually worked with a young Vladimir Putin and was his boss, and, describes these days that Putin would walk into his office, sort of this sycophantic young climber who just needed documents signed. I mean, it was really interesting to hear his descriptions. But I want to play for you one thing he said that I thought was particularly chilling about where this end game is, where Putin's head is, and where this is actually potentially going. Have a listen to this.
His own choice is to stay as long as he can in power. He will stay for the rest of his life unless something happens. He will never give up, because he has no choice, and he knows he may be in trouble if he is. And I don't envy him. He's a lonely man.
He will never give up. He's a lonely man. So, Hal, just from a military standpoint, how does that factor into decision making? Are you, if you're in the Pentagon, are you thinking that's an even more dangerous man than he was a month ago? Or are you saying that's a man, if he's not stopped, it's dangerous, it's beyond dangerous for the world?
Well, within the Pentagon and certainly within CIA and other organizations, they're doing they've had a very good psychological assessment of him for some time, but they're looking at this now with everything going on, with the setbacks, with the military campaign, and I think that's what you see that rolls into the pushback on the MiG-29s in Poland. Is that we're afraid that he is kind of on the edge, and we're not quite sure where his decision making would be on certain things like is he at war with NATO? Is this an active war? In fact, would he start using weapons? He's already talked about nuclear weapons before this thing kicked off. It's got everybody a little concerned. So we're trying to, as far as I can tell, we're playing it very straight, very apparent, as transparent as possible, while providing as much support as we can to Ukrainians. But his state of mind is a big issue. Obviously, we'd like to see him out of power, with whatever that infers, but that hasn't happened right now.
So, Linda, I want to ask you about the other report at the top of this newscast, and that was about the maternity hospital and pediatric wing in Mariupol that was bombed. We didn't know yesterday what the casualty numbers would be, but it turns out 17 wounded and 3 dead, and a child dead. And then the statements that came from the Kremlin that this was an actor's staged event with a blogger wearing makeup. I mean, it's just to the rest of the world, it's beyond the pale. But you worked in Moscow, and presumably you know well how controlled everything is. Can't these stories bleed in through his iron curtain, his iron media curtain? Can't they get access to these stories to see for themselves just how absolutely preposterous this kind of an explanation is?
So Russians are who are skeptical of state media. They can get around. They can go through VPNs and try to get to Western media, but you have to be motivated, and that would be largely younger people. I think the bulk of the population, so you might get that kind of technological savvy, among educated urban people. But I would say the bulk of the population, probably 2/3, is, if they're watching state TV, they're probably, if they're giving it much thought, they're believing it. I mean, it would be like, Alex Jones and InfoWars, who claimed that Sandy Hook massacre was crisis actors. This is the same level of preposterous claims coming out of the government. But, there are people who believe that. I mean, in this country, it's a tiny fraction. But in Russia, people are used to watching TV and most people are just living their lives and aren't, worrying about the world. But I have to say, the economic sanctions, people are beginning to notice. The ruble has plummeted. The McDonald's have all closed. That's huge. I was at the opening of the first McDonald's in Russia in 1990, and that was just thousands of people lined up for that. I mean, McDonald's is now part of the fabric of their life. They have Starbucks. They have, Pizza Hut. They have a lot of Western amenities. And to Russians, this was a sign that they had arrived, that they were integrated in the world. That's all ending. And I think over time, it's going to seep in that something really has changed, regardless of what they're hearing on TV.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I actually stood in that line in 1991 because that line was daily for years and years and years. It was 6 hours long, and it took an entire salary to buy yourself a meal at that McDonald's, and they happily did it. It was the most exciting thing that was going on in Moscow. Linda Feldman and Lieutenant Colonel Hal Kempfer, thank you so much for this. I really appreciate your wisdom and your guidance in these really trying times. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Ashleigh.
Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.